All right, this is Block 7, Manifest Destiny, Lecture 2, kind of an overview at Northern attitudes on slavery. It is a false statement to say that everybody in the North thought the same about the institution of slavery in the years before the Civil War. Even abolitionists themselves disagreed on how exactly to abolish slavery. To imagine that the North was completely anti-slavery and the South was completely pro-slavery oversimplifies a much more complicated picture. There was a lot of people in the North who really didn't care one way or another about slavery. Even some of the abolitionists in the North didn't care one way or another about black people. There's a real diversity of views in the North concerning the institution of American slavery, and I wanted to talk about some of them today. We're going to start kind of with the most extreme abolition, the most extreme people in the North. These were people who were who were considered to be extremists. They were considered to be people who, had their eyes on a pie in the sky, and wanted things that were unusual to want. And so those are people who believed in immediate emancipation of the slaves without compensation for their owners. They believed in full racial equality, that blacks and whites were equal in all regards. They believed that blacks should have full political and social and civil rights, and that blacks should live alongside whites in the United States as full and complete citizens. That is an incredibly radical view for the 1830s, 40s, and 50s. That is a view that is not held by a lot of people. It's held by some, but it is not held by a lot of people. Even the issue of emancipation itself divided people who believed in the emancipation of the slaves and the abolition of slavery. There were those who believed in immediate emancipation. Sign a law, all the slaves are free immediately. Today they woke up a slave, tomorrow they will wake up free. There are some people who say, look, you're going to do way too much damage to the South doing it that way. If you're going to get Southerners to go along, you have to have gradual emancipation. That different age slaves get emancipated at certain times, and after a certain time, all slaves are freed on their 18th birthday, and then we won't have any slavery after 1880. Some distance in the future. That there are abolitionists who believe that in order to kind of bring the South along, they had to abolish slavery gradually, which is how it was done in a lot of states up in the North in the early 1800s and late 1700s when slavery was abolished. People who believed in the abolition of slavery also differed on whether slave owners should be compensated for their slaves. One thing that a lot of people wanted to do was have the government buy every single slave and then set them free, and then take the money. Obviously, they would be paying the slave owners to free their slaves. Here, it's kind of a belief that, look, we understand slaves are valuable, here's a bunch of money, now let us free your slaves. But there are some people who kind of make the moral argument and say, look, slavery is immoral and we shouldn't be, if we buy the slaves, we are by definition agreeing that people can be property. That if you buy a person for whatever purpose it is, then you are saying that that person is a piece of property and that person does not have intrinsic worth, intrinsic value, intrinsic humanity. So even kind of those, people who believed in the immediate emancipation of slaves differed whether over slave owners should be compensated or whether slave owners should just have to deal with losing their most valuable property. The issue over, even among those who believed in the emancipation of the slaves and the abolition of slavery, there was a lot of debate and discussion over racial equality. Was there such thing as racial equality? The most extreme of them believed in, that blacks and whites were inherently equal and the freed slaves should have the same political, social, economic rights as any other American citizen. And a lot of others argued that, look, racially speaking, black people are not equal to white people, and therefore they cannot be granted the same rights as white people could. So even amongst your hardcore abolitionists, there's a big chunk of people who simply do not believe in the concept of racial equality in general. There was a lot of disagreement among abolitionists. Like I said, even people who want to do away with slavery, there's a lot of disagreement over what to do with the freed slaves. Some of them said they can live in the United States as free and equal citizens and live amongst us. Some of them said they have every ability to live amongst us as long as they accept, lesser rights. Early on in his life, Abraham Lincoln took this view. Abraham Lincoln said, look, the races are not equal, only an idiot believes the races are equal, but a black man should be able to earn his living by the sweat of his own brow, that if he wants to own a farm, he should be able to own a farm. But Lincoln did not early in his career believe that blacks should be afforded the same political and civil rights as whites, because he did not believe in racial equality. He believed in racial freedom, but not in racial equality. A lot of Americans said, look, there is no way that whites and blacks can ever live together in peace and harmony, so the best thing to do with all these freed slaves is ship them back to Africa, where they came from in the first place. That if they hadn't been taken from Africa, we wouldn't have this giant problem with slavery now, so the best thing to do with all these freed slaves is ship them back. And there was a lot of abolitionists who believed in the idea of a repatriation to Africa by the freed slaves, regardless whether their families had been here for 200 years or not. There was a big movement to send them back to Africa. And then, of course, how would you pay for that becomes another issue of that idea. So even amongst those whites in the North and blacks in the North who argued for abolition of slavery, how to do it, when to do it, the nature of equality, what to do with the freed slaves, divided abolitionist opinions significantly. And that's just among the abolitionists. Not all Northerners are abolitionists. In fact, most Northerners are not abolitionists. Only a significant, maybe 20% of Northern opinion before the Civil War said that slavery should be abolished. What most people in the North did not like about slavery was its spread. Okay? The Republican Party, Abraham Lincoln, do not, and I can't repeat this enough, do not get elected promising to end slavery. The Republican Party and Abraham Lincoln and this anti-slave sentiment in the North elects people whose goal it is to stop the spread of slavery. By and large, they have two reasons for this. One is a moral reason. They don't like slavery. They think it's a moral evil. But the no spreaders said, look, I think it's a moral evil, but I don't have the right to infringe my values on somebody else. That we don't want slavery to spread, but where slavery already is, look, it's no good, we don't like it, it's immoral, but we don't have the power to abolish it where it already exists. That's the feeling of most Northerners. Slavery's not such a good thing, but we do not have the power to end it where it already exists. All we are trying to do is prevent it from getting bigger and more powerful because it is morally bad. A lot of people who did not want slavery to spread didn't care about slavery one way or another, and certainly didn't care about black people one way or another. A lot of people who did not want slavery to spread don't care one way or another about slavery where it is, but they feel that an expansion of slavery would reduce their economic opportunities. That if a free farmer has to compete with a slave farmer, obviously the slave farmer in their mind is going to have an advantage economically. That a plantation owner who does not have to pay his work is going to have an advantage over a factory owner who does have to pay his work. A lot of people who argued against the spread of slavery are not doing it out of racially pure motives. They're doing it out of economic motives, which are legitimate motives. That free farmers and free artisans wanted to be able to practice their, to farm their land and to practice their trade, where they saw it without competition from unfair slave labor. That is a much bigger motivator for people to join the Republican Party than abolition is. People who desired an end to slavery because it would impinge upon their economic opportunity, are a much bigger part of what will become the Republican Party. And then there are those who just say, I don't care one way or another about slavery, just leave it alone, let them do what they want to do. They are, by 1855, 1860, those people in the North who don't care about slavery are a minority. Most people in the North develop some degree of anti-slave feeling, whether it is out of motives of racial justice or whether it's out of motives of economic self-interest. It differed from person to person. But by 1855, and especially by 1860, and starting in the 1820s, 30s, and 40s, Americans in the North are all developing more and more anti-slavery ideas. But, as we just saw, there is never just one thing that all anti-slavery people thought. They differed on goals, they differed on motives, and they certainly differed on tactics. But what unites most Northerners, and this is going to play a huge role in Block 8, what unites most Northerners is the idea that slavery should not spread into these new lands, won for the United States. These are not lands that are won for slavery. These should be lands that are won, that the prairies are being crossed, the mountains are being tamed, not for the institution of slavery to spread itself across the fruited plain. All of these things are happening so that free-born, free Americans can spread themselves across the fruited plain and not have to worry about competition from black slaves. There's a lot of abolitionists. Their numbers grow every single day, but by and large, what people in the North are after is an ending of the spreading of slavery. Some believe that eventually it will die in the South. Some say, I don't care what happens in the South. But what they were after was an end to slavery's spread.